Disclaimer. The use of video clips at the beginning of this video is purely for the purposes of establishing context for commentary made in this video, and does not indicate ownership of the respective individual's intellectual property or efforts. As such, this falls under the purviews of fair use and is not intended for unauthorized redistribution or dissemination. Link included in the description, fellas.
Now, this is something that I actually thought about when I was a kid. And I noticed something whenever I would go to Chucky Cheese. And my theory as a kid was about their pizza. There's a theory that if somebody at Chucky Cheese doesn't finish their whole pizza, and there's like a few pieces left, the employee will take that to the back, take those pieces off the tray, and form a new pizza with all the other leftovers, and then reheat it and serve it to a new customer.
So if you guys haven't seen Shane Dawson's newest video, he talks about the conspiracy theory against Chucky Cheese, how Chucky Cheese recycle their pizza and feed it to the fucking kids. And if you haven't seen that, you must be living under a fucking rock. Basically, in his video, he talks about how the workers take the leftover pizzas and put it together to make a new pizza. They recook it and feed it to the kids and whoever eats it type of thing.
Hey there! So, 2Joe Panda back in action. We're going to be talking about something a little bit different today. You remember Shane Dawson, right? Shane Dawson, the guy that interviewed Kiro the Wolf?
But I found a furry on the internet named Kiro the Wolf, and he has a YouTube channel, and we're gonna go in. Oh boy. Hey, I got some big news. Sorry, that was a lot.
And basically spearheaded Kiro the Wolf's, wonderful YouTube career. Yeah, he appeared at the center of a controversy that focused on a particular pizza chain, one that I remember very fondly from my childhood. And I am, of course, referring to the video that he did not too long ago, basically purporting that a theory that Chucky Cheese's being the pizza chain I was referring to, had been basically recycling their pizza, but not in the way that you might think. You know, my mother told me a while back that there was a practice that happens at some of the Korean bakeries I like to frequent, that basically what they do is they take like the old cakes and they basically grind up the old cakes, and they basically use that to thicken the flour mixes, or however they make their cakes, and basically utilize old stale cakes in the making of new cakes. And she found the practice to be truly horrifying. Now, I mention this because, for whatever reason, when I first heard that Chucky Cheese's was like recycling their old pizzas and reserving them to customers, that was the first thing that I thought about. And now, obviously, there's no like hard, concrete proof of this. It really boils down to the unscrupulous actions of a particular establishment, and because like when you have a franchise, each franchisee is considered its own fiefdom, you know? As in, while overall they are considered part of the franchise, the way that they carry out in serving the products of the franchise as a whole might differ from location to location. I guess a good example of this is that some of the Subways I used to see, some of them would actually serve like little hand-sized pies, kind of like the kinds of pies that you would see at McDonald's, you know, the apple pies that you saw at McDonald's. And so, that being stated, there's like slight variations between different franchise locations, as in the management that is in charge of overseeing the operations of that establishment might vary in how they go about delivering the service or the product to the customer. So what I think happened with Shane Dawson, I'm just going to go into what Shane Dawson actually did. So he pitched this theory that, hey, listen, I couldn't help but notice that a lot of the pizzas that were being served at at various pizza joints, namely Chucky Cheese's. Actually, I shouldn't say various pizza joints. I should say just Chucky Cheese's, because, we all know Chucky Cheese's, right? You've all been to a Chucky Cheese, right? Me being a kid growing up in the 90s, Chucky Cheese's was the place to go. And I can tell you right now that I have never had a negative experience regarding the ball pit or the slide or anything like that. Because I heard horror stories of like kids that would pee in the ball pits and at worst shit in the ball pits. I remember the news story where there was like a dead rat or a mouse found in the ball pit. So Chucky Cheese's, isn't exactly the perfect place to be. But in my recollection, like as a kid, remembering it as an adult, You know, it was a pretty fairly enjoyable experience overall. Like, I loved going to the arcades. I loved earning tickets. I don't really remember winning many great prizes. I think the prizes were kind of shite, to be honest with you. I remember this weird thing where it was like a frisbee, but in order to launch the frisbee, it was like the size of a coaster, basically, but you'd stick like this little like flexible piece of plastic in the frisbee, and you'd basically flick the frisbee, and the frisbee would go pretty far. But that was about as good of a prize that I can remember from recent memory. But anyway, Shane Dawson, he basically mentions that a lot of the slices that go into a pizza that's served at Chucky Cheese's look very unusual, as in all the pieces are differently sized. There's like a lack of consistency. If you ask for a particular topping, for instance pepperoni being the most common, the slices, like the condiments, not the condiments, the toppings that go on the pizza are out of line. As in, they don't look very consistent. Like, if you sprinkled a bunch of pepperonis on the pizza, and even if you cut it, it didn't really look like it matched up. So he's just like, yo, I think what they're doing is they're taking the pizza, they're reheating it in the back, and they're coming back out and rearranging it and like making it so it look like almost palatable. And you know, if you're like a kid that doesn't know any better, you're gonna be like, oh, okay, I'm just gonna eat it because it's hot, it's fresh. But he's claiming that the pizza is not fresh because it's been reheated. As in, they take it to the back, they do something to, like, you know, rejuvenate the pizza, probably stick it in the oven for a couple minutes, and then bam, you got a brand new quote-unquote pizza right there. And I have to say, definitely based not only on the like pictures, but also my mother having worked in the food industry for a while, like, I'm basically aware of a lot of the practices that go on in the food industry to try to stretch you know, the product as far as it can go, as well as cutting costs wherever like possible. So I don't see this outside the realm of disbelief. What I do think is that it's not exactly a practice that's happening at all locations, as in various locations, like I mentioned before, each franchisee being its own little entity. There's probably like a lot of you know, discrepancies between what would be considered like corporately mandated. So yeah. And there's been a bunch of videos that like circulated online talking about the topic. I mean, it's not like, you know, Shane Dawson's video is the only one purporting all of this to be taking place. My thing is, I didn't really appreciate Chucky Cheese's response. Number one, it was very dismissive. It was very, hey, nothing bad's happening, nothing to see here, please move along. And their cease and desist order levied against, well, supposedly levied against Shane Dawson about talking about the topic of hand. So, yeah. Do I think that this is absolutely the case of all franchise locations of Chuck E. Cheese? No. But could it possibly be occurring at some unscrupulous locations? Definitely. I could definitely see this as being a practice that is undertaken, especially with some of the ex-employees that had their own input. Some ex-employees were more supportive or had favorable things to say for their former employer, versus others that said, absolutely, this is a thing that happened, and I can attest to this. But yeah, personally, my own experience, I remember one of my ex-girlfriends, she had a really shitty day. And so me and a friend of mine, we had this funny little thing that we were going to take her out to actually have a real birthday. So what we did was we took her to Chucky Cheese's, and this is well past her college years, alright? Like, this wasn't, we weren't kids at the time, obviously. And people at the front door were sort of eyeing us, and they're just like, I don't know about these guys, but they just sort of like shrugged their shoulders and like, alright, go on through. So, my experience was that it was like a very weird experience because, you know, in my childhood, I remember a full cast of animatronics. You had that Mario ripoff guy who was like the cook, making all the pizzas in the back. I think his name actually might be Mario. You had that dog, you had that chicken, you had that purple person thing, and then you had Chucky Cheese. And, like, you know, they would be like their own little 5-man band, or 5-person band, I should say, because one of them is a woman. But anyway, so, what was weird about this particular location that we went to, mind you, it's like back in the ass ends of DC, like on the outskirts of DC. So, probably not the greatest area, probably not the greatest example, but what I remember is they had an updated like version of Chucky Cheese on stage, and what was ominous about it was that you had a bunch of portraits of like all the various characters that were typically with Chucky Cheese, like, you know, his friends. And in my mind, I'm just like interpreting this as basically Chucky Cheese's friends all died in like a horrible like crash or explosion or something, and Chucky Cheese is the only survivor, and their portraits hanging on the wall are like a tributary to their memory in living color. And I'm just like, that's my theory about that. That's my interpretation of what happened at that establishment. But anyway, so that's not important right now. I remember like ordering a pizza, and the pizza was pretty fucking expensive. Like a large went for like 20 bucks. And most larges I can get for like $13 or even $10 at some locations. So yeah, that was a pretty expensive pizza. But I will say it was served in a pan. And what was cool about the pizza was I remember very distinctively that the pizza itself was not misshapen or malformed at all. And this is at night. This is well into the hours of operation. So this wasn't like, you know, early in the morning or anything like that. This is definitely well into the night of operations for Chucky Cheese. And the taste was absolutely exquisite, you know. As a kid, I don't really remember the taste of Chucky Cheese pizza. I don't think it was that much better than, like, say, Little Caesars or something like that. But, you know, the taste here was like liquid gold. It just melted in your mouth, and you're just like, it was like a food orgasm in your mouth. No joke. I just remember it being, like, pretty fucking amazing pizza. And I'm like, yo, I didn't know Chuck E. Cheese still served, like, good pizza. I thought they served, like, terrible pizza that had a fucking foot in it. But anyway, so, overall, there was an animatronic on stage of Chuck E. Cheese himself, with the portraits of everyone else. And there was, like, a kid that was just, like, attacking the thing. He was just hanging off of it. He was, like, you know, kicking it, punching it, and doing all this other stuff. And the Chuck E. Cheese animatronic was just moving around. And I heard back in like, the 90s, the animatronics were not exactly safe to play around with. As in, like, you could easily get your fingers caught in, like, the gears and the working motors and stuff that was, like, keeping the thing running. So, either they really improved the design, or this kid was fucking lucky. Anyway, another thing I remembered is this guy was, like, in the Chuck E. Cheese mascot costume, walking around with, like, a absolute horde of kids following his every move. And, you know, I asked him for a picture because I'm just like, hey, I'm here, why not? And he just kind of crosses his arms, like he's just like, yeah, you would like a picture of me, wouldn't you? Well, get it fucking over with, pal. I got a 5-hour shift ahead of me. And, well, we went to play at the arcade. I gave all the tickets to the girlfriend, and everything went pretty peachy keen from there on out. But yeah, that was my personal experience in recent days. I can't say the same for, like, all the other Chuck E. Cheeses because I haven't, like, been there on site to bear witness to what Shane Dawson was talking about. But it is fairly interesting, the theory they pitched, as well as the evidence, quote-unquote, that he pitched. Because remember, his evidence was basically from a combination of varying sources, which might, in fact, be evidence that this, like, practice of recycling the pizza, then taking it to the back, putting it on another tray, rearranging it with other pieces of pizza, and making it look like it's actually like a whole pizza and reserving it to customers. That might, in fact, be taking place here. I'm not saying that absolutely, beyond a shadow of a reasonable doubt, it is, because I'm not privy to the inner workings of a pizza joint, but I will say that it is definitely a possibility here, you know? So, just as an aside thinking about it, Shane Dawson played a lot of clips basically implying or insinuating that Chuck E. Cheese was basically gearing little kids up for the life of gambling when they become adults. And I can see where he was going with this, you know, but at the same time, Chuck E. Cheese being a family-friendly, child-based oriented sort of gaming and restaurant establishment, I just felt like that was kind of shoehorned in, you know what I mean? Like, I didn't really appreciate that aspect of his video. Like, if he's going after Chuck E. Cheese's for basically reserving old pizza for new clients, that's one thing. But at the same time, you know, you need some sort of incentive to keep playing the games. And obviously the prizes that you get from trading in all your hard-earned tickets are pretty They're pretty lackluster, to say the least, as in, you could probably go to the dollar store and buy a lot of the low-ticket items that they offer, but for the higher-end stuff, you can just go to a toy store and pretty much buy, well, actually, now that I think about it, at the time, you could go to a toy store, but now, you know, with Toys R Us being gone and basically liquidated, and a lot of other toy stores basically not being basically being non-existent, I guess your best options are Walmart and Target, or Target if you prefer. So yeah, also what's interesting is that there were a lot of people that took to YouTube to make their own, like, you know, commentary about all this. And like I said before, this is probably a sort of, like, issue that's confined to certain, like, establishments, as in, given that it's a franchise, there are various franchisees that are running, like, you know, their establishments in their own particular fashion. Not all of them are going to be doing this sort of questionable activity, even if it's even true. But, yeah. So one guy I think of pretty much on the top of my head. I don't remember his name. It was like, I only saw the video once, so please don't jump down my throat on this one. Basically, he faked getting a job. At least it seemed pretty fake. Like, why would you get a job at a pizza establishment to prove a certain story, unless you have nothing else going for you?
I was actually thinking, hey, let's get a real job at Chucky Cheese. So I went into their website the next day. I'm pretty sure it was like middle of the day. I signed up, you know, I put in like the work hours in the bottom. I was trying to get like a job like late. So I submitted it and I got a reply email type of thing saying, oh, we'll like call you if we're interested in you. So somebody from Chucky Cheese called me, and I'm gonna show you that little clip right now.
Like, it really begs the question, as in, I've been in that situation before where I'm jumping from job to job. You know, you're not your one priority in mind, unless you have an alternative source of revenue, is that you're going to try to get a job and, you know, keep that job. You're not going to, you know, throw it all away just so you can make a video on YouTube, unless you're going to be making like $1 million or something like that. Let's face it, like, those days are pretty much long gone, but you're not going to throw all of your potential revenue stream away just for one video to try to prove a point. And it was pretty weird. Like, the guy, he recorded himself having a conversation with a so-called store associate that basically called him in for an interview. The interview seemed okay, I guess. I don't think he actually posted the interview. What he did was he basically stated, yeah, there's like a non-disclosure agreement, and there's also an agreement set in place where you can't use your phone on the premises. And I really wanted to get this gig so that I could actually record them, you know, reserving old pizza. And, like, he says that he gets caught during his attempts at actually recording, you know, them doing the, like, you know, them reserving old pizza. And, like, the exit video is like a joke. You know, the guy is this fat, overweight dude who's just like, listen, our whole, you know, business operations here are to make money, okay? We're just here to make money, okay? And I can't have you coming in here and basically exposing our deep, dark secrets to the public, all right? Now, pardon me while my jowls grow to the size of British bulldogs and I shove a cigar in my mouth.
I told you yesterday when I hired you not to bring your phone. So why'd you do it?
Because I just wanted to show some of my friends, you know, how you guys make the pizzas.
No, you can't do that here. You signed an NDA form. You remember that? That clearly says you can't bring your phone.
I just didn't think it was such a big deal.
It is a big deal. Listen, at this Chucky Cheese, we reprocess our pizzas to make profit, to make money, okay? That's what we do here.
Mm-hmm.
And you coming here and interfering with that. I don't need that. And we're in the business of selling pizzas and to make money. Now, you clearly don't understand that, and you clearly violated the agreement that we had. You need to explain yourself.
It was just really fake. And, like, the way he's holding the camera is in such a way that anybody with half a brain or, you know, any awareness or perception is going to immediately spot that. Like, it was like basically holding the camera up to the guy's face. So, as far as the legitimacy of that, unless he's, like, damn good at hiding stuff and is, like, basically a level 100 at, you know, sneak skills from Fallout, you're not going to be getting away with that, recording an exit interview and leaving an establishment or your place of work, you know? And it all seemed pretty staged. There was a bunch of jump cuts. Other people that were fairly astute pointed this out as well. And it didn't really help Shane Dawson's case any because, you know, let's face it, it seemed pretty fucking scripted as hell. And people are probably going to look at that and just be like, So even if Shane Dawson did have some legitimate concerns and basically proof that various Chucky Cheeses out there are doing various things that are unsavory and not exactly within the code of ethics, I don't think that's going to help his case any. That's, in fact, that's like, you know, basically a legitimate conspiracy theory gets sunk because your conspiracy theorist allies, you know, post material that's counterintuitive to the overall narrative. So yeah, that didn't go over too well, and various people made videos about that particular video, and other people said, hey, I'm gonna get a job at Chucky Cheese's just to prove Shane Dawson wrong, or right. And, you know, again, I know I've said this several times now, but being a franchise, all the little franchisees that are underneath that particular franchise are going to operate their businesses in, you know, slightly different ways. It's not all going to be, like, totally uniform. Like, they're not all going to be the same exact thing. So I say all that because with the plethora of videos coming out to either corroborate or criticize Shane Dawson's presentation of his conspiracy theory, it didn't make for a good consensus one way or the other. Everyone had something a little bit different to say. Kind of like me, but let's not dwell on that for too much longer and move on with the rest of this video. So I mention all this because Shane Dawson, his modus of operandi, basically he actually goes to a Chuck E. Cheese location and he actually films the experience firsthand. And he shows various pizzas, and I believe an employee was caught on camera like touching the pizza and walking away. I think it had just been served to like a customer. Well, maybe not. Maybe it was just sitting there. I don't remember quite clearly, but I do remember that Shane Dawson basically talked about various things, and his evidence might weigh up for like 1 or 2 of the establishments, but not for all, certainly. And, you know, obviously Shane Dawson got a lot of pushback about this, you know. He got pushback not only from Chuck E. Cheese's for obvious reasons. I mean, they're seeing, you know, an upstart basically threatening their business model, and they can't have that. So I can completely understand why they would, you know, give a cease and desist order if one actually was levied. I would imagine it was because, if I remember correctly, Shane Dawson's video got a lot of pushback, but also he got a lot of hatred from the community. Basically, like, people complaining that Shane Dawson was threatening a perfectly legitimate business model just because he had a mere suspicion, and that I'm noticing a recurring theme here. Basically, that because he was in such a high position, that he had so much clout, that he had so many viewership, that he was basically being an influencer, but not in a good way, as in a bad way, that was potentially destructive to Chuck E. Cheese as we know it. And personally, I really hope that Chuck E. Cheese continues to last for years to come, but the signs are pretty clear on the wall that Chuck E. Cheese is just barely surviving, it seems. As in, people don't seem to, like, go out for, like, you know, family get-togethers like they used to. I mean, in an age where we have the internet and we have various other wonderful things like virtual reality and various other, you know, forms of entertainment, there's other ways to have a birthday party than going to, you know, admittedly a pretty attractive place, but I heard some Chuck E. Cheeses are pretty atrocious. They're basically like Freddy Fazbear's, when Freddy Fazbear's itself was on the side of the life, like at the end of his life. He needed to be like a little bit more respectful and a little bit more responsible in how he delivered the information. And what was good is that he pitched this as a theory and not abject fact, but at the same time, the damage was already done. I mean, you know, you're basically saying, hey, the food that you're eating is basically has not only been handled by other people, but it's also been just sitting around for a while, and that it shouldn't be served to customers. And I'm actually very interested to see what the FDA and, you know, Better Business Bureau and various other places might have to say about this, if in fact laws were being broken, that people were reserving like old pizza as new. Me personally, I might just be disturbed when I say this, but if the pizza's tasting good and it's not giving me any like health problems, then I'd probably fucking eat it, because you gotta bear in mind, I'm pretty much like still like a college kid. I remember doing that sort of stuff, as in like, yeah, that pizza that you left out from the night before, as you kept the box closed, I'd still be eating that. And obviously my roommates would be looking at me kind of funny, but I personally saw no problem with it, you know? I was a college kid at the time. I didn't have money to spend on random things. I needed to live on a diet and a budget. So, yeah. So Shane Dawson has been at the center of controversy. This happened, what, several weeks ago? But yeah, his video has not been taken down. I thought it was at first, but various imitators came out after he had released the first video. And there was like a really fake-ass video that somebody pitched that was kind of weird because, basically, the guy who made the video says that he got a job at Chucky Cheese specifically to test and see whether or not Shane Dawson's video is actually legitimate. And not only does he get caught with his camera, like he claims that there's actually company policy that you're not allowed to have your camera out, like on site when you're at the job, that you have to leave it in your car and stuff like that. He got caught recording how a pizza was being prepared for the next, set of guests, and that he was called in the back room, and he recorded the exit interview where his supervisor was basically laying him off. And the thing is, the way the camera's held, unless he's got that thing in like a bag or he's like concealing it somehow in a very creative way, there's like no way that he'd be able to get away with that. Because I can tell you right now, like if I was in an exit interview and I had to talk to like a underling under me, me being like the fictional how would you say, like supervisor in the situation, I would damn well notice if somebody was holding up a phone. And I would just be like, hey, can you put the phone down? We have an extra interview to talk about. Alright, Mr. Bueller? But yeah, it was just kind of weird. And like the guy said, okay, I couldn't get evidence of it happening in store, but I can like show you guys something I recorded during my exit interview. And the thing that I remember the most about his quote-unquote supervisor, if it was even real, is that he was just like, we're in the business to make money, alright? We're just here to make money, alright? So and he just kept saying that over and over again. And I have met supervisors that was kind of like that, but I highly doubt that there would be somebody so cartoonish as to like repeat the same thing over and over again. You know what I mean? So yeah. As far as Shane Dawson's video goes, it was a decent video, don't get me wrong, but I don't feel like it held as much of the the journalistic integrity as it could have. I don't think that it was like really embodying the ideals and virtues of journalism, like, you know, basically independent journalism going down and out, like trying to determine the validity and veracity of a certain claim. And the claim that he was making was that, you know, Chucky Cheese's had a policy that they were basically recycling day-old pizza, or, you know, old pizza that was basically being reheated to be served to customers. And it does raise a lot of questions, you know. It certainly raises the question of what responsibility do quote-unquote social influencers, like people like PewDiePie, or people that get really prominent on their YouTube channels, what responsibility do they have to sort of mitigate the potential damage that they might incur on various people, whether it be Chucky Cheese's, the employees working for them, or the consumers? Because you can bet damn well that a lot of people probably took this at face value. That, as in, there was like no creative or critical thought going into whether or not Chucky Cheese's was guilty of this. You know, people will believe just about anything they want to hear or anything that they can see as like feasible online. But me personally, I will give Shane Dawson some credit here, that he actually did go out to a Chucky Cheese's. He did look for himself. He found some evidence of wrongdoing. But, you know, he probably could have worded it a lot better, a lot more ambiguously, so that he wouldn't be subject to, like, a legal action against him. And, I don't know, it just sort of, you know, begs the question, like, what caused him to undertake this massive undertaking? And at what point is he willing to back down if Chucky Cheese's goes after him? And Chucky Cheese might not have a case, you know, because he is expressing his opinion. He's just like saying something that he thinks is going on. And for all intents and purposes, it probably is absolutely going on at certain locations. Like, it's not beyond the realm of reasonable doubt. However, to make the claim that it's absolutely happening at certain places, it would require an examination, like a thorough examination of said places, and make a determination based on what you find, whether or not it actually is taking place. Anyway, as far as Chucky Cheeses go, I'll recount one last story before we end the video here. So, as a little kid, me and a bunch of the other little kids in the neighborhood, we really wanted to go to Chucky Cheese's. Now, the problem with Chucky Cheese's that we weren't aware of is that you can't just simply go to Chucky Cheese's. You have to have an adult or a chaperone or a guardian, like a legal guardian, that can watch over you and make sure that you're not a shithead and, like, you know, knocking down machines and, like, attacking the animatronics and doing all that other stuff. And that somebody in the establishment can be held responsible for your actions. So we lived in Edgewood at the time, which is located in Maryland, north of Baltimore. And we wanted to go to Bel Air because that's basically where the Chuck E. Cheese is located at. And the trip from Edgewood to Bel Air varies between 15 to 30 minutes. So we wanted my aunt, who barely spoke any English at the time, to drop us off. And we were just going to go to Chuck E. Cheese's and have a nice day for ourselves. Now, unfortunately, we weren't old enough to get in, and they basically stopped us at the front door and said, "Hey, you need a parent or guardian to accompany you into our store? Sorry." I will say this. The walk over to this Hallmark store, or some convenience store in the Festival of Bel Air, basically a strip mall, we walked over, and I had the cheapest, most best-tasting soda of my life. The one and only Dr. Thunder. Now, I can't say as to whether I would actually take Dr. Thunder's, like, you know, medical advice, but I will say as a soda, it is a damn good soda, and definitely a runner-up for Mr. Pibb, and definitely better than Dr. Pepper, which is pretty surprising because usually knockoffs are pretty, tasteless and terrible. But anyway, so yeah, on a hot summer day, that tasted amazing because this was like in the dog days of summer. And unfortunately, we were stranded there for a long damn time. You know, my aunt didn't come back to pick us up for like a while. Because obviously, you know, she drove out, dropped us off, drove back to do whatever she was doing. I actually don't really think about what adults do when the kids aren't around. So she does that. We have to call in and just be like, and that's during the time when cell phones weren't really all that common. I sure as hell didn't have one until, you know, later on when I was 16, when I was taking my driver's test. We do all this, and we're just like, yo, we need to be picked up. And we were stranded there for a couple hours with only probably like less than $5 between like all of us. And I think that was like 6 kids. But yeah. So we didn't, that technically isn't like a Chuck E. Cheese story because we didn't actually get to go in. But it's the one that I remember and recall like at face value. I remember another time I was at Chuck E. Cheese's with my mom's friend. They were kind of poor at the time, but you know, we go to this Chuck E. Cheese's. I just remember there being like not a cesspool, but it was definitely a waste management center because like the stench outside was horrible. And I look up and I just see these massive like beehive-looking structures that are, I mean, colored of bronze. And I'm just like, yo, that's where all the smell's coming from. I was too young at the time to really realize what those places were all about, but it definitely imparted a experience on me just seeing the massive structure that was. But yeah, I tried calling my mom, and unfortunately the phone that I was using was actually just one of those like arcade machines, and I didn't realize it because it was just far away from the arcade machines that it didn't look like it was actually like part of the arcade. It looked like a very like stylized phone that you'd stick money in to make a call. Unfortunately, when I did that, I think what happened was that there were pre-recorded messages in the phone, and they would only play if you deposited some tokens or coins or whatever. And unfortunately, what I didn't get to call my mom. What I did get to hear was like random ass information that somebody at fucking, you know, Chuck E. Cheese thought would be a great idea for kids to learn about, is about Beethoven. I don't even remember explicitly what they're talking about Beethoven about. They just said some random information that was like, I'm just sitting there holding the phone, listening to all this. I'm just like, okay, that's nice. I kind of wanted to hear my mother's voice, but okay. Thanks for using my last 2 quarters. Anyway, yeah, that's all I really remember right now. But anyway, so yeah, Shane Dawson, he seems like a pretty cool guy, but maybe he should have had second thoughts about this particular endeavor. More power to him, though, for trying to expose bad actions of, like, you know, food employees. And before I end the video, I'm just going to mention some things. Alright, so a lot of the responses from certain employees and various other people was that the reason that the pizzas were unevenly sliced is because it is really hard to keep them still when you're cutting them. However, I would rebuke this because the problem is various other pizza places that make the dough fresh on site and actually prepare it in the oven on site, they have no problems cutting a perfectly good pizza. And you don't even have to be like a pizzeria master to like do that. You know, you just use the little rolling cutting thing and you're fine. But no, for some reason, Chucky Cheese's has to be special. They can't cut worth shit, according to them. And as I said before, I don't think that that's a very suitable response. I think the reality here is that some of these locations are definitely engaging in some bad business, and they should probably be held accountable for that. But again, it's not for us to decide, it's for the authorities to decide, and we'll see as evidence comes out whether or not this is actually the case. So you know what, I'll just say this: Shane Dawson, you did the world a service, you did the internet a service, and you gave me some material and content to talk about for my YouTube channel. So, guys, if you liked the video, why don't you hit like and subscribe for more. This is Tujo Panda signing off. Till next time, guys, thanks for watching. You all have a better one.